time myself. I suppose it's incumbent on me to try to make a comment about the presentations. And I'm probably not going to do it in order. And I'll start with, well, I will start, I guess, in order, with the 1904 Louisiana Purchase exhibition. I come to Japanese history from European cultural intellectual history, and I do comparative global history. So I'm interested in the global context in which Japan emerged from the middle of the 19th century. And that context is frequently described as the new international order that the United States and Great Britain, France, etc., imposed on Japan. What is generally not indicated is that it's not simply a global international order, it's a white supremacist international order. Because white supremacist values were at the cutting edge of this new world system. And that was apparent to any people who were the subjects of Western colonialism. So the response to it is naturally contextualized within not simply this is the new global system where you have putatively equal nations that respond to international law rather than to the prior so-called East Asian system dominated by China with status, etc., tribute relations, etc. So the race is not always mentioned. It depends on the position of Japan, how it waxes and wanes within this situation, within this context. And I think that 1854 represented, of course, a crisis. We all know that for the Tokugawa Bakufu. But to the samurai from Satsuma Chochu Tosa, who carried out, led, spearheaded the Meiji Restoration, I think it also represented an opportunity because here was the chance to create not simply a independent Japan. In other words, so obviously they were concerned to preserve Japan's independence, but also to create a powerful nation state by, in effect, using elements of this newly imposed international order. And one of the places, after the Restoration, that I think you can see this pretty clearly is in the Iwakura mission to the West from 1871 to 1873. And the secretary to that mission compiled a lot of notes and culled those and published 5 big volumes full of information. And this mission was very impressed with the way the United States, Great Britain, and Germany particularly organized themselves. And they investigated, they visited factories, munitions plants, and they visited museums, and particularly in England. And one of the values they saw in museums is that museums indicated the progress of civilization. And here was a group of people who were going around the Western world to find, to discover, and bring home international, quote-unquote, best practices and that they could use to construct a powerful nation state. They visited Switzerland, very impressed with Switzerland, but they by no means wanted to be the Switzerland of the East. One of the most impressive meetings they had was with Otto von Bismarck, a dinner meeting, and Bismarck was sympathetic to them, and he said, look, you're like we were, you're like the way Prussia was in the 19th century, early 19th century. We were kicked around, we had no respect. But we didn't gain respect until we began to build a powerful military based on a powerful industrial base. And of course, Japanese leaders had already realized that that's what they needed to do. So this really impressed them vividly. So we want to use, the museum example is that, so we need to build a powerful nation state. We need to turn our people, our Japanese people, who belong to this community, Han, We need to turn them into citizens. And one of the ways to do this is to represent graphically, physically, the progress that we've made. And museum is one way of doing it. Magazines are another way of doing it. The Japan Graphic during the Russo-Japanese War. They had a special edition on the Russo-Japanese War. During the Russo-Japanese War, I'm skipping around. During the Russo-Japanese War, the send-off tours where the troops would move through Japan towards Kyushu, and they would have farewell celebrations at each place the train stopped. Local groups organized these celebrations, and through that process, they developed a sense of nation, a sense of being Japanese. So this mission returned to Japan very much impressed with what they had seen in the outside world, and very eager to build a powerful Japanese nation, but not just an independent nation, but an empire. And one of the reasons for that is because they were impressed with the idea, in an imperial age, that you could not be an independent nation without the resources, human and material, of an empire. This is the Great Russian Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the British Empire, the nascent German Empire. So this is what we want to do. And they came back at a time when the caretaker government at home had been planning an invasion of Korea, spearheaded by Saigo Takamori. And they squashed that. Iwakura squashed that, intervened with the emperor, squashed that. Saigo Takamori and Itataki Taisuke subsequently resigned from the government. Saigo went home and ran military academies. Itataki began the people's rights or popular rights movement. So split the government. But those who remained in the government, and mainly Hokubo Toshimichi and Ito Hirofumi, began to build this very powerful nation state with a centralized education system, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the goal was then to not simply preserve independence, but to use the international order in order to achieve power status. In other words, I'm saying, I think it's their goals are underestimated. They underestimate their goals. We simply say they were simply reacting. And one of the things they immediately did in using that was to, instead of invading Korea, which they thought could provoke a war with China, which they weren't yet prepared for, and with the possible intervention of Western powers, was to send a punitive expedition to Taiwan, because Aborigines there had killed 80 or some sailors from the Ryukyu Islands, which Japan was contesting sovereignty with China about. So here's an opportunity to show Japan's power in a harmless way and to get one leg up on China. And the rationale they gave for that mission was that this is a civilizing mission. So we're going to civilize these people. And it was a very difficult war, but it was successful. And this was a rationale that Western countries would have difficulty in responding to. We're civilizing these people. Now, this is not simply borrowing from the West. During the Tokugawa period, and even in as early as Heian times, there had been expeditions against the Emishi, the northern barbarians, and the Tokugawa, had Matsumai daimyo were in control of Hokkaido, and from time to time they take over. And this was rationalized. They didn't use the term savagery then as sort of civilizing mission, not in those words. So when the Russo-Japanese War occurred, one of the strains, and there was some opposition to it, there was a peace movement in Japan. One of the strains was that this is a civilizing mission against Russians who were variously, at times, described as barbarians, and then at times, described as a worthy enemy. So this discourse of civilization was frequently deployed, used. So in the report we've heard, it was very important to substantiate Japan's image as a civilized nation. And the World Fair provides the opportunity for doing that. You're participating in a global event, which sort of has a hierarchy unintentionally of nations. And you're demonstrating that you are part of this global order, but you have a distinctive culture. And in terms of society, well, I mean, we'll speak volumes about society. That heredity of taste is a remarkable book. Obviously, it's anti-war, but it strikes me somewhat as a sort of a ghost story. And it reminds me of Izumi Kyoko's short story, One Day in Spring, where a man meets a woman in a temple. But to me, one of the interesting things about this book is how he uses this notion of hereditary transmission. And again, I want to contextualize this, because he does cite Spencer, and he does cite Haeckel and other European writers. So the basic transmission, the base of it is biology. And this is the era of scientific racism. He's not deploying racist terminology. But I think that's the context here. And he links it with the traditional notion of karma. And, so this sort of domesticates it. Right? And the presentation on girls' manga or comics, again, here is a representation of an attempt to sort of nationalize, to gender, to include women as they were being included allegedly in the Western world within the nation. Okay, thank you.